Nate, a few weeks ago, we did a video talking all about Enoch Powell and how his memory has been maligned, how leftists, globalists, all sorts of enemies of the West have just painted him as some demonic figure, some just complete racist bigot. Well, and we exposed that that's just simply not the case, not even close. He was some sort of man of genius ahead of his time. Well, I thought that we could do something a bit similar, looking at the real detail, the real history of Senator Joe McCarthy, who, in a similar way, earlier and in a explicitly much more communist sense, has been completely maligned to the point where his very name now is just shorthand, just a byword for sort of un-American authoritarianism, like a fascist, a Nazi, right? Even at the time, Truman said things like, some people, meaning McCarthy, some people would like to turn the FBI into the Gestapo if they could, right? And it's been in the histories ever since, obviously written by leftists and enemies of the United States. That's what he is. He was just some drunk maniac who was out to just destroy people for the sake of it, falsely accusing good, upstanding Americans of being communists. When the fact of the matter is, that's not what happened at all. And I thought we could just go through it a bit, a little bit of an overview, nothing too in depth, too long, but talk about that McCarthyism, the spectre of McCarthyism.
Political profile, I guess.
Yeah.
Similar to the Enoch Powell one, right?
Yeah. So, as I say, he has been painted ever since. There's even a movie not that long ago with George Clooney, making out that it's a slippery slope. There's a slippery slope towards fascism and authoritarianism, and it's truly un-American, unliberal, wrong, just wrong to accuse people who of being communists who aren't. Well, all this goes back to the war, World War II, and the years after, the 1950s. In fact, some of the story starts even before the war. And the fact of the matter is, in the United States, a bit like today, a bit like the United Kingdom, not saying the United Kingdom is clean of any of this, but we're talking about McCarthy, was in fact riddled with both out-and-out Stalinists, Maoists, American communists, and then a whole swathe of what often gets called fellow travelers. We might call them pinkos, people that weren't actually card-carrying members of the Communist Party of the United States, weren't actually fully assets of Soviet espionage, but nonetheless were sympathetic and helped out and worked towards it. So, I mean, you ready for a deep dive? We'll get into this. I've got some receipts.
I'm ready. It's funny, isn't it? Like, just before you sort of begin to regale me, but it is funny, isn't it? Like the useful idiots and how people at the time be like, "Oh, it's un-American," blah blah blah. It's like, yeah, well, if you could see America now, like, are you really? Come on now. The Islamo-communism that's going on, all the sort of support for Gaza, Palestine. Like, come on now. You've got snakes in the grass. The fox is in the hen house, as it were. You've already got subversives there. So, yeah, it's not un-American. Obviously, just before you sort of, again, go off, it's not un-American to seek to retain and conserve your culture. How on earth is that un-American?
It's your patriotic duty to do such a thing. I would argue McCarthy was a true patriot, a true American, doing the right thing, actually. Okay, so just before I launch into it, just to say for any Americans who might get a bit annoyed that some limey like me is having a pop at them. Not at all. I'm half American. I'm one of those Anglos that loves America. And
part Native American, apparently.
Well, we don't talk about that. Yeah, no. One of my DNA results came back. For anyone who doesn't know, doesn't follow me on Twitter, there may be a tiny amount of American Indian DNA in me from the Ontario region of Canada, the east coast of Canada. I identify as Mohawk now. I'm saying that. Said that on Later Sea to Sound on Twitter. So I am one of the First Nation peoples. More American Indian than Elizabeth Warren.
Well, yeah.
Anyway, it may just be a glitch. It was a negligible amount. It may just be a bit of noise in the DNA. I don't know. Anyway, we're talking about Joe McCarthy. So it's the Cold War, right? The height of the Cold War, straight after World War II. Right. So the idea that there's Reds under the beds, the idea that there may be Soviet or communist China or any sorts of Reds infiltrated the United States straight away isn't crazy. It's not as crazy as it might sound now. It really was a different world. The Cold War was absolutely a real thing. Okay. A lot of the revisionist, or even, well, you call it mainstream histories that try and paint McCarthy as the baddie and everything he did was wrong-headed and evil, just don't really talk about the broader context of the Cold War, that Stalin and his successors were absolutely trying to infiltrate and undermine the United States as much as they possibly could. Okay, so Joe McCarthy made a speech, a specific speech in 1950, the Wheeling, West Virginia speech, a bit like Enoch Powell made like a specific speech that got him in trouble. And in that, he talked about how the United States has been infiltrated by all sorts of communists. And it was just jumped on immediately. And they tried to stifle him in a myriad of different ways, tried to character assassinate him in every way they possibly could. But the fact of the matter is, it is real. Basically everything he said is real. In the decades since, it's been proven to be real. Quick word on that then. So the KGB released loads of files in like the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, just saying, yeah, that guy McCarthy accused in the 50s or the late 40s or whatever. Yeah, he was. Yeah, he's one of ours. It's absolutely an agent for us. Or there's the Venona decrypts. There was a thing in Berlin. There was East and West Berlin, wasn't there? And the Western intelligence services made a tunnel and tapped into the Soviet intelligence pipeline, signals intelligence, and got a few years worth of decrypts from the Soviets in Berlin, which again weren't released until the 1990s. But again, once they were, it's like, oh yeah, look, right there. Look, Joe McCarthy was absolutely right about that one, and that one, and that one, and so on, and so on. So, all right, with that said, Joe McCarthy accuses quite a lot of people of being communists. His enemies said he had a list of over 200 names, 204 names, and that's just slander, that's just libel, that's just not true. Well, the fact is he never claimed to have 200 names. He actually had the Lee list, which is something more like 100 names, and 80 of which were still working for the State Department. So the infiltration was all over the place, from the OSS, Overseas Services, the precursor to the CIA, so the American intelligence services. There's the Amerasia scandal. People can look into that in their own time. People like Philip Jaffrey, I'll name loads of names. Thomas Corcoran, John Service. There's a big one. John Service was just absolutely later proven to be a spy for all intents and purposes, right? And someone like McCarthy would like name him, and the sort of left-leaning pinko establishment would cover up for him and say, no, he isn't. No, he's a man of great service, great American. But no, he absolutely was involved in the China stuff, Chiang Kai-shek, and essentially allowing communists to win in the Chinese Civil War that happened sort of almost immediately after World War II, which was actually a continuation of from the 30s. But anyway, I digress. So John Service, just look at anyone. It's just an absolute slam dunk. John Service was absolutely a traitor. At the Treasury had quite a few people. Sol Adler Nathan Silvermaster, Harry Dexter White. There's a big name. Harry Dexter White. Massive, massive, powerful name. Harry Dexter White. Look into that. Again, it's just proven now, just absolutely the case. It was working both sides, to put it mildly. There's so many names. Robert Miller, Ambassador Philip Jessup. At the White House, Lachlan Curry. Extremely well-placed people. But I suppose the State Department is the big one, because that's what old Joe McCarthy was, and the McCarthy hearings were sort of largely about. That a lot of the American establishment after World War II did do, not thoroughly enough, but a lot of them did do a sort of a house clearing. Because if anyone knows the history, during the war, of course, the West, Britain and the United States were allies with Joe Stalin, right? During the war. It was immediately upon the end of the war, or actually just before, everyone realized there would be a Cold War. If we're not going to go all the way to Moscow, if we're not going to, the Allied armies in World War II, if we're not going to push past Berlin and just take out the Soviets right away, starting in 1945, then there's going to be some sort of Cold War, some sort of East-West bloc split. And everyone saw that. Everyone saw it coming. So, if we're not going to do that, 1946 rolls round or whatever, and a lot of the American establishment does do some sort of house cleaning. Not so much the State Department. Now, the State Department, if anyone doesn't know, it's the American equivalent of our FCO, the Foreign Office, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, i.e. the Department of Government, which deals with all foreign affairs. Right, and so it's not just diplomats, but it's also like foreign intelligence as well, like MI6 for us, or the CIA for the Americans. So the State Department is a big thing. The whoever's head of state right now, it's Marco Rubio, for example. You're absolutely one of the most powerful men under the president, arguably like the second or third, arguably most powerful person at the state. Okay, State Department was not only riddled with communists or fellow travelers, but also didn't do a house cleaning and did everything they could, really, to prevent someone like McCarthy. There are other senators and congressmen like Whittaker Chambers, other people that tried to do very, very similar things to what Joe McCarthy did. It's just history has decided that McCarthyism is like the great monster. So they did things like destroying records. When they realized McCarthy and others were getting too close to the truth, they would just destroy records. One time they transferred loads of records to the White House so that if and when it ever came up in like a congressional or a senatorial hearing or something, they can legitimately say, we haven't got the records anymore. End of story. Stuff like that, right? Yeah. Just sitting on records for ages. They've been subpoenaed to give evidence, records, and they'll just take a year or more to produce them. In the meantime, who knows what's been doctored? Somebody like John Service is allowed into their records to just destroy and doctor and change things, right? But people still to this day say McCarthy had no names. It was all nonsense. It was all just made up. It's all just a flight of fancy. It was all just careerism by McCarthy. There's nothing there. Haldor Hansen, look into that. Alger Hiss, for many a year, Alger Hiss was a poor guy that was just a character assassinated by McCarthy and Nixon, and he didn't do anything wrong. Well, he absolutely did. He absolutely was. Elizabeth Bentley, Edward Condon, Dean Acheson. Oh, there's a big name. He was the head of the State Department. Dean Acheson. Right. Senator Homer Ferguson exposed him after the fact. Oh, never did any time. Never actually ever had to answer for his treason. Right. At the very, very top of it. The names go on and on. Louise Benson, Adlai Stevenson, the second, a big name. But it's not just the State Department and the Treasury and the White House. It's sort of all over the place. I mean, at Time Magazine, Gustave Duran, the bloody Manhattan Project, Oppenheimer. People talk about, poor Oppenheimer was destroyed and he didn't do nothing. Well, he absolutely was a fellow traveler. Right, he wasn't actually one of Stalin's espionage agents. But okay, Klaus Fuchs sort of was. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, who went to the chair for their treason, for just basically giving the Stalinist regime nuclear secrets. David Greenglass, Harry Gold, right? All the names are there if you want to look it up. I'm not making any of this up, right? And it just goes on and on and on. Like Hollywood, don't even get me started on Hollywood. It's nearly all of them. Like today, you've got the odd based one, the odd like proper patriot, right? But a lot of them, or nearly all of them, are sort of, again, pinkos, fellow travellers. Gene Kelly, Catherine Hepburn, Henry Fonda, Jimmy Cagney, Gregory Peck. Goes on and on and on and on, right? There's all these other things like the Civil Liberties Union. That's the thing that sickens me to this day. So many organisations and people pretending not to be Marxist-Leninists, Maoists, communists, hardline socialists. They pretend they're not. They say they're not. They'll just be democratic socialists or just liberals, just call themselves liberals. No, they're not. Or there'll be some other organisation which hasn't got the word socialist or communist or Marxist in it, but they're absolutely, again, fellow travellers, right? Something like the what's that organisation in Britain that with the wolf in a sheep's clothing? You know what I'm talking about?
Fabian Society.
Exactly, the Fabian Society. Nowhere does that scream communists trying to destroy your country and the West, working tirelessly to do that, whilst all the time pretending they're not, insisting they're not. Right? They had the Civil Liberties Union in America. It sounds very nice, doesn't it? You got Voice of America, a radio station. Raymond Kaplan, William Marx Mandel. Right? They're working towards the goals of the Soviet bloc, the communist bloc. There's a thing called the Institute for Pacific Relations, the IPR. Frederick Field, Stanley Carter, Joseph Barnes, Dr. Owen Lattimore, for example. Again, this organisation, the IPR, Institute for Pacific Relations, pretending that it's what it says on the tin. We're just working towards Pacific relations. That's all we're doing. Yeah, right. Like Dr. Owen Lattimore is absolutely working to undermine the goals and aims and interests of the United States in favour of communism. Right, and that's not even getting started on the dozens and dozens and dozens of other names, lesser known names that might not have a Wikipedia page. Dozens and dozens and dozens. That's not to talk about all the different judges who collapsed cases. That's not to talk of all the universities going back to the 40s till today, riddled with pinkos, people that are sympathetic to the enemies of the West and the United States. Okay, so, pardon me. So, right, it's all there. And so McCarthy tries to do the right thing, right? Tries to do the patriotic thing and expose these people. And at the very least, get them fired from their jobs in the Treasury Department, the State Department, the White House, whatever, wherever. At least just try to expose things like the IPR or Voice of America. Right. And he was just thwarted in real time at the time, just thwarted at every possible stage that they could, you know. There was the Tidings hearings. There's a Congressman, Millard Tidings, a Democrat, of course, who just tried to stop McCarthy immediately. Like once McCarthy makes that Wheeling, West Virginia speech, Tidings just starts hearings just to try and make sure that McCarthy can't go any further with his investigations, trying to smear and destroy McCarthy personally, ruin his career. Right? So it just goes on and on and on. And I mean, the story to this day is that McCarthyism is sort of evil and wrong, and it's like 1 degree of separation from the Gestapo. Right? It's un-American, and it's just not the case. If you find people saying that to you, anyone watching this, if you find people talking about McCarthyism and how evil it is and stuff, it's like you're either talking to someone who doesn't know anything about what actually happened, don't know anything about the Cold War and Stalinism and his successors, or just an out-and-out lefty, a fellow traveller themselves, who's not interested in the truth and is just happy to smear someone like Senator McCarthy. as again a baddie, just a general purpose evil person who loves fascism or something. I mean, so that's it in a nutshell, really. I mean, he didn't live all that long. He's dead by the 60s.
Yeah,
he was actually a bit of a drinker, and there's some question marks over exactly the details of his death. But anyway, won't go into that. Maybe that is a touch tinfoil hat. But the point is that McCarthy did nothing wrong. In fact, I would argue he absolutely did the right thing. There should have been more of them, more of men like him, who were prepared to stand the hazards of the dire, prepared to stand up and say, no, this is what's going on, and it's wrong, and it's not in our interests. Let's do something about it. Let's clear them out, basically. And it's
interesting, isn't it?
A lot of it. Sorry, one last thing to say. It's the same to this day, but now in Britain, at least, it's sort of the spectre of Islam, that a lot of our institutions are effectively captured or infected with Islam and people that are sympathetic to it, as well as still socialists, like the Socialist Islamic Alliance. And so we need more men like McCarthy that are prepared to stand up, and despite all the slings and arrows that are thrown at them by the mainstream media or the deeply entrenched establishment, which wants it all to continue or go further, and just stand up and say, no, not on my watch.
It's interesting, isn't it, that throughout history there's you can sort of point to singular, more often than not, singular entities that have clocked something that's going on, and then they become they become the target of the establishment, of the state. Broadly, I'm speaking quite broadly here. McCarthy obviously became a target and was slandered effectively. Enoch again became a target, slandered, destroyed, reputational destruction. And then time has obviously proven these individuals right. But I think that there's something in that, is that history has proven them right, and history singles them out as isolated men that sort of stood tall and proud. But actually, if you look at, I think, the advent, and one of the things which is so good about the modern era is the distribution of information. We're dealing with lower IQ people nowadays. Yes, education is slipping, and yes, critical thinking has slipped along with it. However, if you look at all of the voices that are coming out and saying quite loud and proud things, that if they had done so in, say, Enoch's time, they would have been absolutely destroyed along with Enoch. And I feel like, at the very least now in our modern era, where information is so freely distributed, there are more men and women, more people standing proud with their convictions against the establishment, the state. And I think that's why the state has become, the establishment, whatever, has become so fixated on the control of information lately. Just an anecdote, just an interesting point I thought I'd throw in there.
No, it's absolutely true. We do live in a different world now to sort of the 1950s. That's sort of the Twitter world now, the online world. And hopefully it will be easier or more possible to expose things and bring it to the attention of millions and millions of people a lot more quickly. I mean, fingers crossed. I wrote an article quite a while ago now for Lotus Eaters, and I think I called it, McCarthy did nothing wrong. There you go. So there's 1,000 words or more. I don't know. It's not all that long. Where I make the case. And so, once again, like the Enoch Powell thing, I advise people to do their own research, read about it for yourself. There's loads and loads of books and documentaries on both sides, and just have a look at it yourself and see what you think about the likes of Dean Acheson or John Service or Harry Dexter White, and see what you make for it yourself.